Good morning. I am here today to talk to you about the nitrogen that is leaving your fields, which you painstakingly and at great expense applied, what's leaving through your tile lines. And we all know, based on the science assessment that Dr. Mark David did, the work that you heard about today in his video, what Lauren's been talking about, that nitrogen is a critical issue, the most critical issue, when we talk about agriculture in terms of our nutrient management and our water quality issues in the state of Illinois. And why is that? That's because Illinois contributes, as a whole state, we contribute 20% of the nitrogen that's entering the Gulf of Mexico. Well, that wouldn't be so bad if there were only 5 other states contributing nitrogen in the Gulf of Mexico, but that's not the case. There's at least 12, there's really 31 states that drain some part of their state into the Gulf of Mexico. 20% is coming from the state of Illinois. 11% of the phosphorus is coming from the state of Illinois. How much water do you think we're contributing to the Gulf of Mexico? The state of Illinois contributes about 7% of the water, but 20% of the nitrate and 11% of the phosphorus. So that's why when other states are looking at us, they're going, your water's hot. They're looking at that and they're saying you're contributing more than your share. And, you know, it's hard for us to argue that. A lot of that is because we have 10 million acres of tile drain land in Illinois. We need tile drainage in Illinois. If we didn't have tile drainage in Illinois, we'd have bigger problems than our nitrate issues, in my opinion. But we need that tile drainage, and we can do a better job than we're doing right now of managing our nitrogen so that we keep more of it going to our crops, producing some of the greatest crops in the world with some of the most productive agricultural land in the world. But we can do a better job of keeping that nitrogen out of our tile lines, out of our local water sources, and out of the Gulf of Mexico. I know all of you are aware of the water quality issues that are making headlines. Right now, it seems like it's monthly. We have been seeing water quality headlines. And you know that it's agriculture that's in the crosshairs of a lot of these issues. The Des Moines Waterworks case, we just talked about that. Everybody up here has said something about that case, just about. Well, this is something that is a grave concern for us. This will be certainly multi-million-dollar case. It will almost certainly go to the Supreme Court to be settled. If the Supreme Court settles on behalf of the Des Moines Waterworks, that will spell the future for regulation in Illinois and the rest of the Midwest. We have got to be aware of this case. That is a prime concern of ours. If we have our tile lines regulated as point sources, that will be a different world for us. The state of Ohio has also been having more than its fair share of water quality issues. They have nutrient management restrictions in Ohio now. You'll recall last fall there was the Toledo case. Lake Erie was having these harmful algal blooms that were resulting from the phosphorus losses that were washing, a lot of it, the phosphorus was coming from wash-off into Lake Erie. And as a result, the citizens of the city of Toledo, Ohio, could not drink their water, they could not cook with their water, they couldn't even bathe with their water. That was a very high-profile case and a big black eye for agriculture in the city of Toledo. 150 miles south of Toledo, in Columbus, Ohio. Who knows what's happening in Columbus, Ohio right now? Right. The city of Columbus, Ohio, parts of it, are under a do not drink the water watch for pregnant women and infants under 6 months of age. And that's because of elevated levels of nitrate. And just last week, in a very surprising turn of events, we find that it's not just the pregnant women and the infants who are being advised to not drink the water in Columbus. Gentlemen, you are no longer exempt from our water quality issues for your health. It turns out, this is true, that when men who are taking Viagra drink large amounts of water that is high in nitrate, it can cause a precipitous drop in their blood pressure. Dangerous drops in blood pressure. So, hey, that's just the news you can use, maybe. So, And then in our other issues, we have the Chesapeake Bay. The Chesapeake Bay is what we all aspire not to attain here in the Midwest. We do not want to have the level of regulation, but it's what we'll be looking at if we do not choose to use our own voluntary conservation management practices right now to take care of our own water quality issues. So that's what we need to discuss. You all are looking at this ridiculous picture of this orange water coming out of a rusty faucet in this picture that the Mother Jones News used to publish their water. And you think, the water coming out of my tile lines doesn't look anything like that. Well, neither does high nitrate water coming out of a faucet. That's a ridiculous picture. This water coming out of your tile lines, though, you look at it and you think, why, it looks pristine to me. It smells great. It looks clear. I'm doing a good job managing my nitrogen. I don't think I have water quality issues. My neighbor, on the other hand, he's a different story. But we need to have one more news flash today. And that news you can use is, if you're farming on tile-drained land, you are losing nitrogen through your tile lines. Even if you aren't applying nitrogen, just like the slide that Dr. Bob Hake just showed us, you cannot have any nitrogen fertilizer out there and you're still losing nitrogen from your tile lines. That's because we have these beautiful nitrogen-rich soils in the state of Illinois. We can still do a much better job than we're doing overall, so that when I tell you you're losing nitrogen from your tile lines, you should have two questions that pop up into your head, and that's, well, okay, how much? And the second question is, how do I lose less? So the Council for Best Management Practices has provided these ion-specific electrodes, which are back in the back of the room, that we've been taking around to these nutrient loss reduction strategies to show you how much nitrogen are you losing, because we believe you can't change what you aren't measuring. And our second big motto is, it's always better to know than to not know. This is a confidential service. Nobody will know what your levels are but you and the person taking your sample, and we won't even write it down if you don't want us to. But you should know. You should know what that number is, and you should know what that number means in terms of what is a good number. So many of you allowed us to sample your water. Thank you very much for bringing it in. Today we only had about 6 samples come in, and every one of you allowed us to put that up on the board using an anonymous number. Oh, you can't read them. So the numbers go like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm very sorry about that, but sorry it didn't show up very good on the slide there. But these are the numbers that we got this morning for them, and I put in a couple of dummy numbers too. Since we only had 6, I didn't want anybody to get pointed out. So those 6 samples that we brought in today, you can see are listed here along with a couple that they are dummy numbers, but they're very representative of what we've gotten this past week at other road shows in the area, in the state of Illinois, really. And the other thing is we have 2 guidelines for you to use. What's the drinking water standard? We've talked about it several times. 10. 10 parts per million is our drinking water standard. That's that orange dotted line. And then the grayish dotted line up there at the top, that's 20 parts per million. If your tile nitrate levels or your drainage ditches or whatever, if your values are between 10 and 20 parts per million at base flow, that is a really good goal. That is what we'd like to see our farms in Illinois maintaining. I'll show you the literature we're using to base that on, the science information that led us to that. That's a really good goal. There are a lot of things that affect that number, though. And the number that you got this morning, if you brought in a tile water sample, all it represented was your number this morning. Tomorrow, it could be very different. Yesterday, it was probably different. All this rain, we're getting some high numbers. These are some high numbers that we saw this morning. You can see we had some stream samples that came in that were above the 20 parts per million. We had a tile water sample that came in, one that came in that was a little bit above the 20 part per million, and then several that were within our 10 to 20 part per million range. So very good if you're between the 10 and 20. If you're above the 20, I'd say, hey, come back, take another sample in 3 days. And then take another sample in 5 and another sample in a week. And let's start to track that. If the number keeps going up, maybe we should talk. If the number starts to taper off and go back down, start thinking, well, what were the other things that could have affected that? Because your nitrate concentrations change, of course, with your fertilizer application rates and all the other 4 R's, your placement, your timing, and your source. So your fertilizer application methods and management have an effect on your nitrate concentrations, but so do the time of the year, what stage of crop growth you're at, and of course the weather, and especially precipitation. We have had a lot of rainfall in the past several weeks. Some of you might even be a little bit concerned about how much nitrogen you've lost, how much is remaining for your crop at this point. We look really good at this point. So that's some of the news. That's what we got this morning. A little bit more to guide you about the numbers for our nitrate concentrations in tile or any of the surface waters that we see. The university, the Purdue University, Eileen Kladivko and her colleagues there produced a really good extension article. It's called Interpreting Nitrate Concentration in Tile Drainage Water. A really good article. We'll be happy to send that to you. We have some copies in the back as well. And their guidelines would suggest that if you maintain a level of less than 20 part per million in your tile drainage, that's a good goal. And above that, you need to think about what's happening with my tile drainage water. Here's a little bit more from that article. The really low concentrations of nitrate nitrogen, less than 5 part per million, where do you think they're coming from? Not usually agricultural fields. It's where we're growing perennial grasses. So where we have hay, alfalfa, those are often below 5 parts per million. Golf courses. I know everybody loves to hate on the golf courses. Oh, they could be a big part of the nitrogen. But yes, they do get fertilized year-round. But we're spoon feeding that crop all the time, and it's growing 9 months out of the year. It's not generally a big problem in terms of nitrate leaching. Some other concentrations we might look at, 5 to 10 part per million is still quite low, and we might see that perhaps from a soybean field that's not receiving nitrogen, although that's not always the case. We might see it if we're growing a corn crop at about 45 pounds per acre less than the optimum nitrogen rate. Who's super excited about that one? No one, right? So what's the third case? Row crop production with a successful winter cover crop to trap nitrogen. What that means for us is a successful cover crop. A cover crop that establishes really well has a beautiful, beautiful potential to reduce extra nitrogen from your tile lines. And what's so great about it is it's not just reducing your nitrogen from your tile lines, it's keeping the nitrogen in your field. It's not just keeping it out of the water sources, it's keeping it for your crop. Just like Dr. Have was talking about some of the really good results that Shalimar Armstrong has gotten at ISU. 10 to 20 is what we'd like to see if we're applying the optimum rate of nitrogen fertilizer. Anything more than 20 parts per million, think about what might be happening, take another sample in a couple of days, and track it. This just demonstrates the very low numbers that we're getting from golf courses. So this is some numbers that my colleague Caroline Wade collected from several golf courses in the area last spring, excuse me. So you can see these, don't worry about the ammonium, but these nitrate levels are all less than 5 parts per million. So they're doing a fine job in terms of their water quality. How much nitrate nitrogen are we talking about for that 10 part per million drinking water standard? If you were to have a gallon bucket, a gallon jug, and it had 10 parts per million nitrate in it, you're talking about 0.0000837 pounds of nitrogen in that gallon. So it doesn't take much nitrogen at all to get up above that drinking water standard. And there's another very important component to water quality when we're talking about nitrates. It's not just about the concentration, it's also about flow. The flow coming out of your tile lines. If you have a flow rate such that you are filling up a 5-gallon bucket every 2 seconds, and if your concentration is the 10 part per million drinking water standard, you are losing 18 pounds of nitrate nitrogen from that tile line every day. So you have to think about that number and then consider what area that's draining. Is it draining a 90-acre area or just a 45-acre area? So of course that's a different component. And when you divide that, when you take your load, which is what we get when we multiply concentration times our flow rate, you divide that by your acreage, now you got pounds of nitrate that you're losing per acre of your crop. If we had that same flow rate that I was just telling you about, 5 gallons every 2 seconds at 10 parts per million, and if we had that same rate for 6 weeks, we would have lost over 750 pounds of nitrate nitrogen from that tile line. And that's really quite in line with what researchers are telling us that we're finding. So that answers how much am I losing. Now let's think about how can I reduce that. And that's what all of us have been talking about today. Please think about the 4 R's. Think about getting your rate right on your fertilizer applications. Use the MRTN. Go to your retailers, tell them you want to use the MRTN rate, consult with them, use another nitrogen rate, but just be sure you're using some kind of guidelines for your application. A university recommended rate is what we recommend. Use nitrification inhibitors. Please use a nitrification inhibitor if you're applying fall nitrogen. It's just considerate of the other 87% of farmers who are 87-ish % of farmers that we find are using nitrification inhibitors. If you're applying all your fall and nitrogen and you're not, you're just taking away from all the good work that they're doing. So please, it's $13-ish per acre. That's not nothing. That adds up. I know that that adds up. But you're guaranteed a return on investment for that money. Let's go back to our farmers in the Chesapeake Bay. Ask them what the ROI is on agricultural regulation. So let's consider that, please. Use a nitrification inhibitor in the fall, a urease inhibitor in the spring. Consider split application. That is a great way to reduce your nitrogen losses. And variable rate. If you have the technology, and that is a really wonderful way. There's a lot of potential in variable rate applications. And then there's cover crops, great potential. The University of Illinois can find 30+% reduction in nitrate losses with a really good establishment of a cover crop. Our reduction strategy says 20%. So we can even do better than what the strategy says in some cases. CRP and wetlands. Wetlands are a great solution, and bioreactors. So with that, thank you all very much. I ask you to please take this opportunity to consider on your farm what you want to do. This is where the rubber hits the road, and it might be where we get squished. So please, everybody, consider what you can do to reduce your nitrate losses. Thank you very much.